My name is Carla. 3 months ago, during what was supposed to be the proudest moment of my career, my manager publicly humiliated me in front of the entire executive team. He yanked the HDMI cable right out of my laptop mid-sentence and said, loud enough for the boardroom and the interns in the hallway to hear, "That's enough. Let someone competent talk." The room went silent. I remember standing there, staring at the blank screen, feeling the kind of numbness that comes before either tears or fury. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. What he didn't know was that the timing of his cruelty couldn't have been more perfect. Because while he thought he was destroying me, my phone buzzed with the message that would change everything. Before I tell you exactly what that message said, and how it became the weapon that brought his entire career to its knees, please make sure you're listening closely, because what happened next proves one thing. When someone tries to bury you, they might just be planting the seed of their own downfall. Let me take you back to where this story really began. Because stories like this never start with the revenge. They start with the first crack in the glass. 18 months earlier, I joined Viridian Systems, a mid-sized tech firm that specialized in data visualization software. I was brought on as a strategic analyst, a fancy title for person who makes complex data look simple enough for executives to pretend they understand it. My boss, Martin Crane, had been with the company for 12 years. He was one of those managers who mistook intimidation for leadership. If you didn't agree with him, you were too emotional. If you spoke up with confidence, you were aggressive. He especially hated when a woman got more attention in meetings than he did. During my first few months, I learned to stay quiet, to speak only when called upon, to make my points sound like his ideas. But I couldn't keep doing that forever, especially when I realized our company was heading for disaster. I discovered a pattern of data errors in our client reporting system. Numbers that didn't add up, visualizations that misrepresented financial outcomes, and projections that made our clients look more profitable than they really were. It wasn't fraud, but it was dangerously close. I spent weeks cross-referencing client records, recalculating models, and building a new framework that corrected those errors. When I showed it to Martin, expecting gratitude, he didn't even look up from his phone. He muttered, "Just stick to your lane, Carla. We don't need another perfectionist slowing down the process." That night, I stayed at the office until 2 a.m., running simulations to prove that my corrected model could save Viridian from an impending client exodus. I wasn't doing it for glory. I was doing it because I believed in the work. The next morning, the CEO stopped by our department. Martin presented my findings as his own. He even used my phrasing when he described the problem. I stood there, smiling, clapping with everyone else, my stomach churning. I thought, fine, let him take the credit. I'll keep my head down. But things escalated. Martin started scheduling client review meetings without inviting me. He forwarded my reports under his name. He even told HR that I needed supervision after I corrected one of his miscalculations during a team call. The worst part? Everyone saw what he was doing, but no one spoke up. Not even the people I thought were my friends. Then came the global tech proposal, a $20 million partnership deal that could double Viridian's market share. I was put in charge of building the data model, the visual strategy, and the entire presentation. For 6 weeks, I worked nonstop. Late nights, cold coffee, empty takeout boxes. My slides were flawless. My analysis airtight. The CEO himself said, "This could make Viridian a major player." And that's what led to the morning that changed everything. I walked into the boardroom early, set up my presentation, checked the sound, made sure the connection was stable. My hands trembled slightly, but it wasn't nerves. It was adrenaline. This was the moment my work would finally speak for itself. Martin entered 5 minutes late, coffee in hand, arrogance in his stride. "Try not to bore them, Carla," he whispered as he sat. The room filled. Executives, investors, the global tech delegation, our CEO. I started speaking, guiding them through my slides, explaining the new predictive model that could save millions. Heads nodded. The CEO smiled. Even the investors leaned in. That's when Martin stood up. He walked over to my laptop, leaned in close, and said in a voice dripping with sarcasm, "All right, that's enough. Let someone competent talk." Then he yanked the cable. The screen went black. The room froze. My ears rang. And then, my phone buzzed. One new message. The timing was surreal. I glanced at it. The subject line read, "Offer confirmation, $600,000 annual package." I looked up, met Martin's smug gaze, and said quietly, "Perfect timing. I'll take the position." He frowned. "What are you talking about?" I smiled for the first time that morning, because what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Global Tech's board had been watching me for weeks, and they hadn't called to discuss data. They called because they were ready to make me an offer. When I walked out of that conference room, my hands were still trembling, but not from humiliation this time. It was adrenaline. For 18 months, I'd swallowed every insult, every stolen idea, every smirk from Martin Crane. And in less than 30 seconds, karma had finally decided to clock in. I remember standing by the elevator, still hearing faint murmurs from the boardroom. Martin's voice was low but frantic. The CEO sounded confused. Someone asked, "Did she just say 600,000?" I smiled. The message on my phone was still glowing on the screen. Offer confirmation, $600,000 annual package plus signing bonus. Please confirm availability for onboarding call today. Just hours earlier, I had thought that message might never come. Let me explain. 2 months before that disastrous presentation, I attended a leadership summit in Chicago. Viridian had sent me there mostly because Martin didn't want to go. He said he was too busy managing real projects, which was ironic considering I did all the work he claimed as his own. At that conference, I met Elena Park, a senior executive from Global Tech, the same company we were pitching to that morning. She led a session on data ethics and client transparency, topics that aligned perfectly with the model I had been developing. After her talk, I approached her, nervous but curious. "I really admire what you said about integrity and data representation," I told her. She smiled warmly. "It's rare to hear that from someone who actually works in analytics. Most people just care about numbers, not the truth behind them." That single conversation turned into a 30-minute discussion about business ethics, human-centered analytics, and how corporate culture often rewards the wrong people. I didn't mention Martin by name, but I hinted at what was happening at Viridian. When the conference ended, she handed me her card and said, "If you ever find yourself needing a place that values what you do, call me." I never thought I'd actually use it. Back at Viridian, things only got worse. Martin started locking access to project files I'd created, claiming he didn't want inconsistencies. He scheduled team reviews where he'd nitpick my work in front of junior staff. Once, after I corrected him on a small data error during a client call, he muted the line and hissed, "You ever do that again? I'll make sure you never work in this field again." That was the day I emailed Elena. "Hi, Elena. This is Carla from the Chicago Summit. I think that time might have come." She replied the same afternoon. "Let's talk." We scheduled a virtual meeting for the next day. It wasn't a job interview in the traditional sense. She already knew my background, my work, my values. Instead, she asked questions like, "What kind of culture do you want to work in? And what would you change if you could build a data division from scratch?" By the end of the call, she said, "We've been quietly building a new analytics branch here. We need someone who actually understands relationships between data, clients, and people. Would you be interested in leading it?" I didn't say yes right away. I still had loyalty to Viridian, even after everything. I wanted to finish the Global Tech presentation first, to prove my worth, to have something tangible that no one could take from me. But then came the morning of the presentation. When Martin yanked that cable and called me incompetent, something inside me snapped. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. I realized in that moment that I didn't owe Viridian anything. Not my silence. Not my loyalty. Not another second of my effort. So when my phone buzzed and I saw Elena's message confirming the offer, It felt almost supernatural, like fate had been waiting for the exact second Martin crossed the line. I didn't go back to my desk. Instead, I walked out of the building, down the glass staircase, and into the cold morning air. I called Elena from the street corner. She answered on the first ring. "Carla, did you get my message?" "I did," I said, trying to sound calm, though my pulse was racing. The timing was interesting. "Oh?" she asked. "My manager just tried to publicly humiliate me during a presentation." There was a pause. Then Elena said quietly, "Then I think this offer couldn't have come at a better time." She outlined the details again. Base salary, signing bonus, relocation support if needed, and a director of strategic analytics title. I asked, "Why me?" Her answer stuck with me. "Because we've been watching Viridian for months. We saw who was really behind the improvements in their client metrics. You're the reason their data integrity scores improved. And because integrity matters more to us than politics." When I hung up, I leaned against the building, letting the reality settle in. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. I texted her back one line. "I accept." Effective immediately. Then I looked up at the Viridian logo etched into the glass doors and whispered, "Game over." What I didn't know then was that my acceptance would trigger a domino effect that none of us could have predicted. Within days, everything Martin had built around his illusion of competence would begin to unravel, piece by piece, and all I had to do was step aside and let him destroy himself. The morning after I accepted the global tech offer, I woke up before sunrise, half expecting to feel guilt or fear. Instead, I felt nothing but relief. The kind of quiet that follows when you finally stop holding your breath. I brewed my coffee, sat on my couch, and opened my laptop. My inbox was a battlefield. 42 unread messages from Viridian, most marked urgent. Martin had sent 5 himself, each one more desperate than the last. "Where are you? We need to discuss yesterday's presentation. CEO wants an explanation for your behavior. Call me immediately. This is insubordination." I didn't respond. I didn't even open them. For 18 months, I had allowed him to dictate when I spoke, when I worked, when I was allowed to have an opinion. Not anymore. At 9 a.m., I sent a single email. Subject: resignation. Effective immediately. Martin, please consider this my formal resignation from Viridian Systems, effective today. I appreciate the opportunities I had to grow professionally, and I wish the team continued success. Regards, Carla James. I clicked send, shut my laptop, and let out a deep breath. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Carla? This is Patrick Miles, CEO of Viridian." His voice was calm but strained. "I just saw your resignation. Martin tells me there was some kind of misunderstanding yesterday?" I smiled to myself. "If you call public humiliation a misunderstanding, then yes, that's accurate." He sighed. "Look, Martin can be abrasive, but we're all under pressure. That global tech deal is crucial for us. I'd hate to lose you over a personality conflict, Patrick," I said carefully. "With all due respect, this isn't a personality conflict. It's a leadership failure. I've done everything to support this company, but yesterday made one thing clear. I'm done working under someone who mistakes control for competence." There was silence. Then he said, "Understood. Still, I'd appreciate if you could forward the presentation you were showing yesterday. Martin claims it wasn't complete." That made me laugh softly. He'd say that. The presentation was finished weeks ago. In fact, it's already on Global Tech's internal server. He hesitated. "What do you mean, their server?" "Because," I said, standing up and slipping on my coat, "as of this morning, I'm Global Tech's new director of strategic analytics. Have a good day, Patrick." The silence on the line was golden. By Monday, word had spread through the industry like wildfire. I didn't post anything dramatic. Just updated my LinkedIn headline, Director of Strategic Analytics at Global Tech. Within hours, my notifications exploded. Former colleagues messaged me congratulations. Some admitted they'd always known Martin was the real problem. A few hinted they were quietly looking for new jobs themselves. And then there was Martin. At 3:15 p.m., I received an email from him with no greeting, no signature. Just 6 words. "What did you tell Global Tech about us?" I didn't reply, but part of me wanted to. Because the truth was, I hadn't told Global Tech anything bad about Viridian. I didn't have to. They already knew. Elena had explained it during one of our onboarding calls. "We've been monitoring Viridian's data output for months. After your conference presentation last year, we started tracking how their models changed. We could tell when your work was being sidelined. The quality drop was measurable. In other words, Martin had exposed himself without realizing it." Meanwhile, Viridian's chaos was growing. Through a friend in the finance department, I heard that Global Tech's board had postponed the partnership discussions. They wanted clarification on data discrepancies, issues that had appeared after my departure. Apparently, the models Martin had claimed to oversee were now full of errors. When executives tried to reproduce my results, nothing matched. By the end of the week, 3 clients had paused contracts, citing concerns about data integrity. The irony was painful and perfect. One afternoon, while unpacking boxes in my new office, Elena stopped by. "You might want to see this," she said, handing me her tablet. On the screen was an industry news article. Viridian Systems faces client audit following data irregularities. Below it, a photo of Martin standing behind a podium, looking exactly like the kind of man who blamed everyone else when things went wrong. I couldn't help but laugh. "He's probably telling the board I sabotaged him." Elena smiled. "Probably. But don't worry, the numbers speak for themselves. We're already in talks to acquire Viridian's remaining clients." I blinked. "You're buying them out?" "Possibly. Their credibility's collapsing fast. When you build success on someone else's work, it always catches up." That night, I sat alone in my apartment, reflecting on everything. I hadn't planned any of this. I hadn't sabotaged him or leaked information. I'd simply done my job well, cared about the details, and walked away when respect ran out. And somehow, that alone was enough to start an avalanche. It hit me then. The quiet power of doing the right thing even when no one notices. Because eventually, the truth has a way of becoming louder than any humiliation. By the end of the month, Martin's name disappeared from Viridian's leadership page. Word was he'd been reassigned pending investigation. Global Tech had officially terminated their partnership talks. And me? I was preparing to lead the biggest project of my career. What I didn't know yet was that Martin wasn't done trying to save himself. And his next move would cross a line I never expected him to cross. 2 weeks after Martin's name vanished from Viridian's leadership page, I thought it was over. I'd started settling into my new life. Longer hours, yes, but also genuine respect. At Global Tech, people listened when I spoke. My ideas weren't dismissed as emotional, my reports weren't renamed under someone else's account, and my weekends were finally my own. For the first time in years, I felt safe. Until the email arrived. It was a Thursday morning. I was reviewing client analytics with my team when my phone buzzed with a private notification. The sender's name made my stomach drop. Martin Crane. Subject: "You've made a serious mistake. Carla, you may think you've gotten away with sabotaging me, but I've spoken to people at Global Tech. They're going to find out what you did. You used proprietary data from Viridian in your new role. That's a breach of contract and potentially criminal. You should come clean before it gets worse." For a full minute, I just stared at the screen. Then I laughed softly, but it wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. It was a desperate man's email. Still, the accusation was serious. I knew I hadn't taken anything from Viridian, but rumors like that can destroy reputations. So I forwarded the message to Elena and our legal department with a short note. "Received this from Martin Crane." For transparency, within an hour, Elena called me. "We'll handle it," she said firmly. "We already ran a full audit before you started. You didn't bring over a single document or dataset. He's bluffing." She was right. But Martin didn't stop. 2 days later, a professional contact sent me a screenshot from LinkedIn. Martin had posted a thinly veiled statement. "It's unfortunate when disloyal employees profit from information they never built." No names, but everyone in our circle knew who he meant. I wanted to ignore him, but something told me it wouldn't stop there. And I was right. That Monday morning, Global Tech's IT department flagged unusual login attempts to our internal server. Someone from an external IP address was trying to access restricted folders connected to my projects. Elena called me into her office immediately. "We traced the source," she said, turning her screen toward me. "It's coming from Viridian's network." My pulse quickened. "You think it's him?" She nodded. "We can't be certain yet, but given the timing, yes." It was surreal. Martin had gone from humiliating me to impersonating me. And in doing so, he'd crossed a line that could cost him far more than his job. Global Tech's security team launched an internal investigation and informed Viridian's corporate counsel. Within 48 hours, they confirmed what we all suspected. The unauthorized logins were traced directly to Martin's old credentials. Apparently, he'd tried to download several data models, ones he believed I had built using Viridian's proprietary frameworks. What he didn't realize was that I had designed those frameworks myself, entirely from scratch on my own time, before Viridian ever implemented them. He wasn't stealing company property. He was trying to steal mine. When the findings came out, Elena asked if I wanted to pursue legal action. I didn't answer right away. I sat in silence for a while, remembering the day he'd yanked the cable and called me incompetent. The heat of humiliation, the laughter in the room, the ache of staying quiet for so long. Then I looked up and said, "No. Let the truth speak for itself." She nodded, understanding. "It already is." Because while the investigation unfolded, Viridian's reputation was unraveling faster than anyone predicted. Clients were leaving in waves. Their financial reports leaked online, showing plummeting revenue and mounting legal costs. It turned out that Martin had been their primary contact for several accounts now filing breach of contract claims over faulty analytics. Global Tech's legal team didn't need to lift a finger. His downfall was writing itself. One evening, just before leaving the office, my phone buzzed again. Another email from Martin. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was almost pitiful. Subject: I made a mistake. "Carla, I didn't mean for things to go this far. They're blaming me for everything. You don't understand what's happening here. Please, if there's any way you could tell them I didn't steal your work, I'd appreciate it." I read it twice, then deleted it. No reply, no satisfaction, just silence. Because that's the part people never talk about. The quiet after revenge completes itself. It's not joy. It's peace. By the end of that week, Martin's name appeared in a public industry notice. Former Viridian executive under investigation for corporate misconduct. I didn't share it, didn't comment, didn't celebrate. But I saved the article, not as a trophy, just as a reminder. Sometimes the most poetic justice doesn't come from striking back. It comes from letting people trip over the mess they built for themselves. And though I thought this was the end, I was wrong again. Because what happened next would turn that quiet peace into something far greater than revenge. Something I never expected to find in the wreckage of it all. It's strange how endings rarely feel the way you imagine they will. I used to think that when Martin finally got what he deserved, I'd feel triumphant. Vindicated. But when it actually happened, what I felt was quiet. It was a cold Monday morning, about 3 months after the investigation began. I was walking into the Global Tech headquarters when my phone buzzed with a message from Elena. "Check your email." You'll want to see this. I opened it before I even reached my desk. Attached was a link to a public document, an official court filing. Martin Crane versus Viridian Systems, wrongful termination and defamation. But there was more. At the bottom of the document, a note from the judge. Case dismissed. Evidence supports termination for cause it was over. Viridian had turned against him completely. The company's internal audit had confirmed the unauthorized logins, the client losses, and even falsified data he'd submitted to cover his mistakes. The board had not only fired him, but formally barred him from ever returning to a management position in the company. I sat there, staring at my screen, letting it sink in. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even relieved. It just felt final. Like watching the last page of a long, painful book turn itself. Later that week, Elena called me into her office. "You've done incredible work here, Carla," she said, motioning for me to sit. "We've grown faster than projected, and the way you've rebuilt trust with our clients, it's exceptional." I smiled, still unsure where this was going. She continued, "We've decided to create a new department, one focused entirely on ethical analytics and human-centered strategy, and we want you to lead it. Full autonomy. Your vision, your team." I blinked. "You're serious?" "Completely. We want to do what Viridian never could. Build something that values integrity over ego." For the first time, I didn't feel like I was proving anything to anyone. I wasn't trying to outrun the humiliation anymore. I was building something better from it. A few weeks later, I received a message from an unfamiliar email address. No subject line, just a few simple words. "I heard you're doing well. I hope you're happy now." I stared at it for a long time. No threats, no excuses, no blame, just exhaustion. I could almost hear the emptiness behind it. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I closed my laptop, took a deep breath, and walked to the window of my new office. The city stretched below. Endless movement, people rushing, life going on. Somewhere out there, Martin was probably wondering where it all went wrong. And I knew the answer. It wasn't because I'd outsmarted him, or because karma had a taste for irony. It was because he'd built everything on fear, control, and performance. I'd built mine on relationships, respect, and truth. In the end, his structure collapsed under its own weight. Mine kept growing. 3 months after taking my new position, Global Tech officially acquired several of Viridian's former clients. I didn't lead the negotiations, but I did attend the final signing meeting out of curiosity. The moment the deal was finalized, Patrick Miles, Viridian's CEO, walked over to me. I hadn't seen him since the day I resigned. He extended his hand awkwardly. "Carla," he said, "I'll be honest. I didn't see any of this coming. We should have protected you." "You were right about everything." I shook his hand. "It's okay, Patrick. Sometimes it takes losing something valuable to understand what you had." He nodded slowly, eyes heavy. "If you ever want to come back?" I smiled gently. "Thank you, but I'm exactly where I need to be." And I meant it. That night, after the meeting, I took a walk along the river. The air was cool. The city lights reflected on the water like scattered stars. For the first time in years, I wasn't replaying old conversations or rehearsing what I should have said. I was just still. Revenge, I realized, isn't about destruction. It's about restoration. It's about taking back the dignity that someone tried to strip away and rebuilding a life so solid that their opinion no longer matters. Martin thought pulling that cable would silence me, but it didn't. It simply disconnected him from the truth. That respect can't be forced, and power without integrity is just noise. A few days ago, I received my first annual performance review at Global Tech. The last line of Elena's report made me smile. "Carla has redefined what leadership means in this organization. She leads not through fear or hierarchy, but through empathy and precision, a rare combination that has become our company's greatest strength." I closed the report and sat quietly, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Not the kind that demands applause, but the kind that comes from surviving without losing yourself. Because that's the real victory. Not the fall of the person who wronged you, but the rise that happens afterward, when you rebuild, quietly, honestly, and better than before. If anyone watching this has ever been humiliated, underestimated, or dismissed, remember this. You don't have to fight fire with fire. Sometimes the best revenge is simply turning your pain into proof that they were wrong about you all along. And the day they realize it, you won't need to say a word.